Okay, I want to talk about a very bleak book, or at least it feels very bleak to me. It is Leaves by John Simmons. And when I say bleak, I mean bleak in a good way, in the sense that if it's trying to sum up a mood of bleakness, of gloom, it does it very well. Um, it's almost like Mike Lee without the jokes, early Mike Lee without the jokes. It's like a BBC One's Play for Today without the sets. Tonally, it feels like Philip Larkin in prose. Um, it's really good on a particular gloomy male mindset, a kind of lost, kind of existential dread certain men have that doesn't really have any definition, but it's just kind of gloomy and bleak. Um, but I have to say, it is set in 1970. In 1970, and I think if you didn't live in Southern California or weren't hanging out in Chelsea, 1970 was bleak. Um, I mean, I was only 5, but I think anyone who has any sense of what the 1970s were like, especially the 1970s, it doesn't feel like a particularly fun time. And this is set in a small street in North London. Um, it's it's a lot of the time it is wonderfully written, and it is incredibly. It feels a bit like early Ian McEwan without um, the sort of conceit he has. It is quite a sort of generous book in how it um, in how it portrays its characters, even though none of them are glamorous. Some of them are very unlikable. It's very good on men's moods and the effect they have on women, um, the sort of negative effect they have on women. Um, it's I think it's a brilliant tone poem, um, prose poem, and I think if I had to take issue with it, I think it's been given an unfair and unhelpful structure. It happens over a year, and I think that we could have John Simmons could have opened it up a little bit and let it breathe a bit more. It does feel as though he's trying to do too much in the structure, um, or what he's given himself as that kind of frame of a year, winter, spring, summer, autumn. That's the chronology. And I'm not entirely sure the metaphor of leaves works. And they're small criticisms because the heart of the book seems to me so much more interesting and profound that actually these framing devices, I think, actually sort of the limit its scope. Um, but I mean it's a small issue. So, as I said, some of the writing is fantastic, um, and it just gets to the heart of the kind of the quotidian. It's about the everyday, and it's about an everyday I think we don't have anymore, where the food was a bit shit and the beer was a bit warm and few people could afford to go abroad. I mean, I imagine the coffee was terrible, even if people didn't drink coffee. And really, those people, if you weren't part of the sexual revolution in the late 60s, early 70s, there was a whole generation of people in their 20s and early 30s for whom the world must have seemed a very dreary place. Now, of course, why would one want to read a novel where everything is gloomy, bleak, and dreary? Um, well, most often because if the writing's good enough, that mood, that feeling, is just it's not often, we don't often read about it, and therefore it feels quite different. It feels quite um, unusual, um, and sometimes writing should feel slightly claustrophobic and dimly lit, uh, and this is that, and so I think it deserves a wide readership, um, and so yes, if you're interested in a particular tonality about England in 1970 and all its small-mindedness, or breaking out of the small-mindedness, actually not being able to. And there's one character that really does want to break out of it but can't. It also feels a bit like Look Back in Anger, I should say that. It's kind of Look Back in Anger meets early McEwan with the tonality of Larkin. Um, and as I said, some of the kind of, Mike Leigh without the jokes. But that's not to criticise it. It's a very human and well written book.